Our next speaker is Laura Fraser Cruz. Laura is a dear friend and a member of St. Matt's as well. And she is the head of something called the Sunflower Project, supporting women in the city who are overcoming addiction issues and their children. And she is a real trooper. So can we give her a round of applause and welcome Laura?
Well, hello. Thank you very much. What a privilege it is to be here. My name's Laura. And I've been coming to St. Matt's for a little bit over 3 years, I think. And as Ollie said, I run the Sunflower Women's Centre, which is a stone's throw from here, and part of the women's charity Trevi House, which is just a gorgeous charity helping women and their children. So the verse, which we are all working from, which is quite funny, is that verse 17. But I just want to read the verse before because I've got a little bit more to say. So I'm just seeing if I can see. Yeah. So while Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners and the tax collectors, they asked the disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said to him, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." So a little bit of my faith story. And as Ollie said when he heard bits of it, he said it's a sermon in itself. I'm obviously a little bit older than probably 70% of the congregation here, so I'm not going to bore you with it. But I became a Christian over 30 years ago, and I'd like to say it was all plain sailing after that, but no, it wasn't. So, and I became a Christian because my sister became a Christian, and there was such a transformation in her that I thought, what's going on? This is really weird. And both my sister and I were like really naughty. I mean, really naughty. I can't even talk about it in here, how naughty we were. But we were, I worked in the theatre. I lived in London. I loved to club. I loved partying. I loved everything around that. And I was sort of intrigued by this, but I didn't want to become a Christian because my only experience of church was sort of high Anglican village church life where everybody seemed elderly and really miserable. They were, honestly, they were. A bit like the Pharisees, I think. Anyway, forgive me, Father, you have to keep asking for forgiveness, don't you? And I remember one night really distinctly, and we were having one of those long evening debates at my sister's home. And she read a scripture from Jeremiah 29, and I really want to read it to you. You probably know it off by heart. I've never learned it off by heart. I'm useless at it. "For I know the plans for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And for some reason, that just speared my heart. And I just cried. And I gave my life to the Lord. And as I said, it's not a straight path for me. I mean, the thing is, it can be. Become a Christian, do as God tells you, and then you fulfill all the plans for him, and you get to your destination. It's done. Not me. I took the really big round-the-world trip to get to where I am today. So I had some amazing... I worked for a Christian theatre company. I've had amazing experiences with God. I've seen God move. But then I drifted off and got caught up in other things. My own sort of selfishness, my own control freakishness, and thought, I know better than that. Actually, God, you're not working fast enough. I'm going to do that for you because actually, come on, what's the point? So the long and the short is that God's always been there, because once you commit yourself to God, actually, you're always there, and he's waiting for you just to come back, just to talk to him. And I'd never really got that, but I did only a few years ago. So it's interesting, and I'll say it time and time again, that sometimes God, well, for me anyway, has to lay me out to get me to listen to him. And boy, did he lay me out. So a few years ago, I was a real fitness freak and really into sport. So I was doing 2 hours of exercise every day. I was kickboxing, I was running, I was doing everything. I was very, very fit. And then I broke my back. I fell on some rocks and I broke my back, and I was told to stop everything. I could barely walk, actually, for a long time. Panic. I was boxing every Sunday morning. You see, it's interesting that I was boxing on Sundays. Anyway, I had to wait for a back operation, and I eventually got one, and it was miraculous. And it was through that time of being laid out that A, I had nothing else to do but read Christian books, and B, God spoke to me, and he reminded me of Jeremiah 29, and he said, Laura, I've always had plans for your future. I've been here all the time. You chose to take that winding route, but I never left you. And the other bit that I really heard was, come on, let's get on with this. And it was amazing. And I've just moved more and more deeply with him. And I'm just so grateful. And honestly, life is so much easier if we're just obedient. If you take anything from today, take that. I was a sinner and I have also sinned. But you know, Jesus still loves me, which is great. Anyway, so I'm going to say, do you remember a campaign that was in the 90s? Some of you, well, you might not have been born in the 90s, but those who were born before the 90s, there was a campaign called WWJD, What Would Jesus Do? And I remember my daughter had a little rubber band with WWJD written on it. And it's really important, and I try to incorporate this in my life, because sometimes the world is pulling us one way, and it's good to say, what would Jesus do? I think what's interesting, actually, the campaign itself started in the 1800s by a guy called Charles Sheldon in America. So it's not like a new thing, although 90s isn't new, I know that, sorry. Old person alert. And I think it's just an interesting mantra, and I think it's quite relevant to this verse. And as a side, how annoying were those Pharisees? I mean, really, really annoying. You know, you hear it all the way through the Gospels. The Pharisees, you know, in their black cloaks are going, why have you done that? What are you doing over there? Why is he not doing that? I mean, honestly, if I was Jesus, I more than likely would lose it with him. But you know, he doesn't. He's really gentle with his responses, isn't he? Those Pharisees remind me of those seagulls from Finding Nemo. Have you all seen Finding Nemo? You know, it's like they're really predatory and sort of nitpicking and mine. Seagulls, really poignant for Plymouth, I have to say. And but Jesus is really gentle, and he says it's not the healthy that need a doctor, it's the sick. And he really puts them in his place. Isn't that brilliant? You know, and we can all be like Pharisees, can't we? I mean, Pharisees, although they were, you know, keeping the law of Moses and, you know, tithing, you know, inside their hearts, they too were sinners, weren't they, really? Because they were hypocrites and they were legalistic and they were, you know, taking the speck out of other people's eyes when they had logs in their own. I love that one. It's a great expression. So Jesus could be described as, I think, a social worker, a mental health worker, a doctor, a teacher, a healthcare worker. And it's just interesting, that expression. It's not the healthy that need a doctor, it's the sick. And he sort of dares to go against the grain, doesn't he? Which is brilliant. I've got a crease on my piece of paper, which is really annoying, and a shadow. So who are we hanging out with? You know, are we hanging out with the right people? You know, Paul, the apostle, says, get into fellowship. I mean, it's great, isn't it? I can imagine the church in that time where people lived together, ate together, prayed together, and just had such great communion with each other. And he asks us to do that, and it's really important. You just got to look at the small groups that we run, how valuable they are. But who else are we hanging out with? You know, who else are we noticing? Who else is coming to our table? Are we inviting to our table, metaphorically, to eat with us? Are we noticing those people? And remember Levi, the tax collector, and tax collectors are mentioned lots in the Bible, aren't they? But because they were the kind of the spivs of their time. They were the guys in the shiny suits and the BMWs, no offense, anybody who's got a BMW, you know, who are kind of getting rich quick. Because not only were they collecting the taxes for the Romans, which everyone despised, they creamed off a bit more just for themselves. So everybody hated them. They just hated them. So he really was a social pariah, wasn't he? And it's just interesting because, you know, this comes before in Mark chapter 2 where Jesus was preaching by the lake. And Levi would have been in his little booth, as a tax collector's booth, and would have just been hearing what was going on. And it's interesting because actually Jesus knew that he wanted to give himself to him. He knew and said, "Come, follow me." Do we notice? Do we notice when people are hungry for Jesus? And that's the important bit. We must have fellowship with each other, but keeping our eyes open for those opportunities where people are hurting. And my goodness, we are in a society where people are hurting. So I'm just going to tell you a little story that made me laugh, and my daughter told me. And her boyfriend, when he was very little at primary school, got invited to the Smelly Boys' birthday party. And neither he nor any of his classmates wanted to go. But Harry's mum sat him down and said to him, "You have to go to the Smelly Boys' party. Because imagine if it was you and no one turned up." And what I love about that is that my daughter says, with rolling eyes, he's always looking after the smelly boys. So, and I just think that's interesting because Jesus is there for the smelly boys, isn't he? And are we, copying that role model that he's given us? You know, he was there. He was going against the grain of society, and that's what we need to do. And thinking about going against the grain, what does that mean? I renovate furniture sometimes. You know, it's really important that you stand towards the grain. Going against it could ruin that furniture, but that's what Jesus was doing. He was ruffling feathers, going against the grain. And he calls us to do that. He calls us to go to the Smelly Boys party. He calls us to notice the lonely person at university, in your halls of residence, the person at work that nobody really wants to include into anything. You know, the homeless person, the person that's suffering mentally. These are people that God gives us opportunity to come alongside and be a friend, because that's what Jesus would do. What would Jesus do? So he gives us a model to follow, doesn't he? He gives us a model to follow. And it's not that hard. He uses the least to achieve the greatest. So we can all do that. I mean, look at David and Goliath. We can do that. So maybe just have a think about your opportunities as you go over the next week. And remember, it's not the healthy that need a doctor, but the sick. And we are all sinners, me included. We've got an expression at Sunflower, and we say we are beautifully flawed. And it's through those flaws that God redeems us, but he also uses that. So that's really exciting. So what would Jesus do? Use that as your question of the week. What would Jesus do in this situation? Go to the Smelly Boys party. So I'm just going to pray. So, mighty God, you are amazing. You just love us. You give us your grace and your mercy. You redeem us, Lord. And every time we fall short of you, you pick us up again, Father. You wait for us to just reach up our arms and surrender to you. Just thank you, Jesus, for that grace. You knew us when we were in our mother's wombs. You are interested in every bit of our lives. Mighty God, I just pray that you help us to hear the call on our lives, that you help us to easily move in your direction. Lord, help us just stand up to all those opportunities and just be there as a conduit for you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Laura. Should we give Laura a round of applause? Would you like to stand? Let's stand.